All right, hello everyone. Thanks for sticking around. That was a great panel. We're going to go even deeper into NFT land and talk about NFT liquidity. We've got a great panel here. I'm David Pakman. I'm a crypto investor at Venrock. We've been focused on crypto investing since around 2017, 2018. We led the Series A in Dapper Labs, so I've been sort of at the forefront of what's going on in NFT world with CryptoKitties and TopShot. We're investors in Flow and Rarible and Rari and a bunch of DeFi protocols and some other NFT assets. We actually hold a bunch of NFTs. So that's me, but we've got a panel of superstars here, so we'll just go down the line. You guys each introduce yourselves, please.
Hey, I'm Jay, and I founded JennyDAO, and I built an NFT fractionalization protocol called Uniquely.
Hey, I'm Nick. I'm the CEO of UpShot. We're building a crowdsourced NFT appraisal platform.
Hey everyone, I'm Aaron. I'm the CEO of OpenLaw, which is rebranding to Tribute Labs. We pulled together a whole bunch of DAOs, including Flamingo DAO, which is probably the largest collection of NFTs in the ecosystem.
So why don't we start, guys, by just talking a little bit about where we are in sort of the adoption of NFTs, where the market is, before we dig into like, is liquidity required? One argument is things are doing pretty well. We've got $3 or $4 billion in NFT sales just this year so far, maybe more actually, depending on how you count. We've got somewhere between tens of thousands and millions of NFT holders, depending on how you count. And we've got unbelievably active Discord communities and incredible artist participation and a whole bunch of mainstream brands as well following the early adopters in. So things seem to be going pretty well. What's your assessment? Like, where are we in NFT land? Do we have any major problems we need to fix? And then we'll talk about liquidity.
Yeah, I think we're still very early, and what I've noticed is with normal crypto, not NFTs, when your friend from all the way back in high school asks you, oh, should I be buying this coin? It's usually a top signal. But in NFTs, I've found it to be the opposite. When someone that I haven't talked to for years asks me about a random NFT, now I'm like, wait, I should be buying this, because like people are more and more realizing like it shows NFTs are infiltrating culture, and I feel like, you know, over time there's going to be a lot more people that realizes the value of these things. And if we look at the market, like you look at Louis Vuitton's market cap, right? And if you look at NFTs as sort of luxury goods or things that you can flex, which a lot of people do with their profile pictures, there's a lot more that NFTs could achieve, and there's a massive market out there that I feel like is still relatively untapped.
Yeah, I think we're really early. I think a lot of the use cases that have been explored in NFTs right now have been focused on art, on community building, and NFTs kind of offer us something much larger in the ability to quite literally tokenize anything and bring it on chain. And in doing that, we bring it to an environment where we have a plethora of permissionless primitives that can be plugged together in a sort of arbitrary number of ways to create these diverse and sort of expressive experiences. And so what I think sort of the next leg of NFTs are sort of where NFTs interact with DeFi, seeing the financial applications kind of be embedded into NFTs and start to create some truly exotic and expressive financial instruments leveraging the primitive. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely early, although the story of NFTs, started, pretty much around the same time Ethereum launched. So my sense is in 5 years that NFTs are going to eat crypto completely. I think they're easier to understand. There's more use cases. There's more fun. There's a connection to them, and it feels different. And I think that it feels a little bit like social media felt when it emerged towards Web 2. So to me, NFTs really are Web 3 and the core part of Web 3. And I think we're just scratching the surface on what they're going to cover. I also think just more broadly, we're going to begin to see NFTs not just tackle things like art and basic forms of media, but also the broader metaverse, and we're already seeing it in gaming with P2E and play to earn type opportunities. So I think the mantle, I think people have not given it sufficient breadth to understand the scope of where NFTs are going. And I think the DeFi point, as Nick mentioned, is interesting. And I think it's going to require, in the long run, reorienting a lot of these earlier DeFi protocols so that they can accommodate NFTs. And when they hit scale, which I think is going to happen, we're not going to have 10,000 users, but millions of users holding NFTs. You can start to see new DeFi-like products emerging. And that's when I think the real magic's going to happen. Just like Web 1 projects. They couldn't get the scale necessary to build some pretty interesting business models that we started to see, towards the middle and or the end of Web 2. So it's a huge category.
I agree with both of you that the inevitable next step in NFT world is NFT DeFi. But let me argue against it for a minute and just see if just test our reasoning here. It does feel inevitable because that's the way fungible tokens went, and we have a lot of infrastructure that we can, through UpShot and other mechanisms, apply to non-fungibles. But if we think about the major buckets of NFT adoption so far, we have like the Top Shot stuff, like sports collecting. We have the profile picture avatar, massive, and then we have like the Axie play to earn gaming. There are plenty of other successful NFT projects, but those are like the 3 buckets of major adoption. And none of them have benefited at all from any real form of more of the sophisticated DeFi stuff that's yet to come. Maybe they have benefited from fractionalization on the DAO side of things, right? But make the case that NFT DeFi is holding back, without it, not having it, is holding back NFT adoption. Why do people need the other mechanisms that DeFi will bring?
I think it just opens up a vast design space that isn't accessible right now. We can start to really kind of enter spaces like insurance, like bonds, like commodities, annuities, et cetera. We can start to truly realize the transitioning of the traditional financial world into the decentralized financial world. NFTs are a necessary primitive for kind of entering those industries and bring them into this realm. So that's my response to that. Those are massive industries.
Yeah, and I don't think it's holding back NFTs, which is obvious, right, if you just look at the metrics. But I do think what we will see is NFTs used as identity and authentication and proof of work, proof of some sort of participation. And that, I think, is actually the closest thing we're going to get to something like a credit score. And once you have that primitive in place, plus all the DeFi tools, I think you'll start to see a lot more interesting use cases. If you zoom out and assume that NFTs are not just art and collectibles like sports and et cetera, but in the metaverse where you have effectively property rights, I think it's probably the most fertile ground to play around with some of the more advanced lending and other types of financial products and services that you need. So I don't think it's necessary. It's a separate track, but I definitely think it's going to be complementary at some point. In my mind, DeFi is a lot like e-commerce. It's going to plug along. It's going to be really valuable. There's going to be lots of winners. It's going to be a little bit boring, right? It's not as exciting. I know it was exciting like a year ago, and NFTs are more like social media. But when we look at the internet today, media still dominates. So I just think it's a bigger category and an unexpected one.
Yeah, I actually think that NFT is already in use in a lot of DeFi protocols now, right? So Uniswap V3 came with a lot of new features, and we already have $1 billion in TVL through Uniswap V3 LP positions in the form of NFTs. And I think as a developer, when I look at a lot of advanced staking tools, I'm now realizing that using NFTs, there's a lot of extra features and design considerations that you can put in through the use of NFTs. So with fungible tokens, it's kind of hard to track individual positions and track additional metadata that comes with certain users' positions. But with NFTs, you can do all of this on chain, and it actually allows you to do a lot more creative things with staking. And that's why I think a lot more DeFi protocols in the future will be able to use NFTs in a lot of cool ways. For example, I think Compound's lending positions and borrowing positions can also be represented as NFTs. And actually doing that might create more interesting design considerations in the future. Okay,
so if we agree that NFT DeFi is coming, but it's not holding NFT adoption back, the more time you spend in the Discord streams, you hear people saying, what is my collection worth really? Or like, how can I trade out of some of this stuff? So let's talk about liquidity. I think compared to fungible token liquidity, NFTs are like non-liquid almost. I mean, they aren't, but on a comparison basis, right? So let's talk about what each of you are doing to solve some of the liquidity challenges. Nick, we'll start with you. Obviously, you started a whole effort around it.
Okay, yeah. So we're building an NFT appraisal company, obviously, and the reason we're focused on appraisals as this means of increasing liquidity is because NFTs are inherently non-fungible and low-velocity assets, which means they don't trade hands very often, and that means these transfers of ownership that act as price discovery events for fungible assets just don't happen frequently enough for open market transactions to price NFTs efficiently. And so when you look to the real world, or I guess the traditional world, you see things like real estate and physical art that possess similar traits to NFTs in that they are non-fungible, fairly low-velocity assets, and they leverage appraisals quite heavily in sort of supplementing their price discovery. And so we were tackling the problem of NFT liquidity through appraisals, through actually incentivizing experts to reveal their opinion about the value of these assets. And the main benefit of this is that it doesn't violate this low velocity trait, this idea that NFTs must change hands for them to be repriced. Now I can hold NFTs for years and years and have constant updates to their prices and actually get to I guess, have an updated view of my portfolio, leverage these NFTs and the value of these portfolios in kind of unique and interesting ways, and et cetera. So yeah.
So when I first heard about UpShot, which I think is fascinating and is a legitimate approach, obviously, to try to bring some price estimation to non-fungible assets, I thought a little bit about Ray Dalio and how he credits how someone has to earn themselves to become an expert by being right more than they're wrong in some subdomain. So could you talk a little bit about what constitutes an expert in UpShot, and is there a closing of the loop to maintain proof that you really are an expert?
Yeah, I mean, so at the sort of protocol level, it's quite flexible. An expert can be defined as anything. I think in the most sort of robust form of expertise, one has this kind of public transaction graph that they can examine in different ways using kind of the centrality measure of your choice, if you'd like, a personalized page rank to sort of identify the most successful NFT traders and kind of measure their expertise leveraging this. I think a fairly minimal way of doing this while maintaining some level of reliability in that sort of expertise definition is to assess the holdings of a given collector or address for a collection. If I hold 10 CryptoPunks, I've exhibited some level of informativeness when pricing these things. I've parted ways with my capital in the open market. I wouldn't be wasting my own money. And so I think like in sort of assessing collectors' portfolios, it gives us a decent means to bootstrap an expertise network around pricing NFTs. And from there, the appraisal interactions themselves become this way of identifying or sort of misidentifying experts for different collections and different types of NFTs.
So if I hold a bunch of punks and I'm making an estimation or submitting an estimation and I get some sort of higher reputation score because of my collection I own, when it trades in the future, is there a closing of the loop that says that, like, Pakman estimated it was worth 14 ETH, it went for 2 ETH, not such a great expert. I mean, there could have been external factors that influenced that, right? But how do you
yeah, that softly informs the definition of expertise. The problem with that being hard-coded into the system and having these market interactions explicitly redefine what an expert is or how kind of influential one is in appraising an NFT is just, it's quite easy to manipulate the open market. You can go trade with yourself at a certain price and prove that you've had a 100% track record with that NFT. So yeah, it softly informs in a sort of social setting what an expert may look like based on the closing of the loop, but doesn't explicitly inform it.
Jay and Aaron, one of the ways you've approached, I think, DAO or NFT liquidity is through DAOs. You've got a lot of expertise there. Could you guys talk about what you've done in that space?
Yeah, I mean, I also just wanted to add to this NFT liquidity point. I'm not 100% sure that it's not a little bit of a red herring. So talking about punks, Flamingo DAO is the third largest holder of punks. We have about 218 punks, full attribute set, super rare alien, and just understanding kind of our members who also separately hold tremendous amounts of NFTs. It's not clear to me that they're looking to exit out of the NFT ecosystem. They are happy to trade into things like punks and hold them. And there is liquidity there, right? Those markets are liquid enough that they seem to be happy to consolidate back into blue chip NFTs. A little bit like what we saw back in 2016 to 18, where people would consolidate different holdings back down into Bitcoin and ETH. So I think it actually is just a parallel digital asset economy that's emerging, and some of these questions about pricing it back to USDC or pricing it back into ETH or Bitcoin or whatever other digital asset, may it's an argument, but I think it may miss the mark. I think there's probably 3 buckets outside of just direct sales in terms of dealing with the liquidity problem. We've seen fractionalization through great platforms like Fractional, which we backed. Obviously, UpShot is taking care of some of the pricing information related to that. And I think DAOs are another massive category there. In part, you can use a DAO to basically serve as a vault of assets and create, hopefully over time, a tradable token on top of that. The question is, how do you get there, but also make sure that it's not going to get hammered down by regulators? So that is a vector that I think lots of different DAOs are going to experiment with and play around with. We'll see kind of how that goes. I think there'll be different approaches to doing that. But that could be one way to basically provide liquidity, not on a one-off basis, like something like fractionalizing an NFT, but on an entire portfolio, a little bit more like a structured product at that point. So.
Maybe as you respond, Jake, can you talk a little bit about, I think there's different tiers to the market. Talking about liquidity in punks is different than talking about, the other 1,000 projects below, project number 10, right, in market size. So liquidity in blue chip NFTs is probably different than liquidity broadly, but I'd love your view.
Yeah, so Uniquely is a NFT fractionalization protocol as well, and it currently has over $50 million in TVL. And the reason it has that much TVL is because there's a staking program where liquidity providers are incentivized to provide liquidity for these fractionalized assets that are created on Uniquely. And the reason why JennyDAO came in with $20 million of liquidity in day one on Uniquely was also because a lot of the DAO members were excited and interested in farming Unique by providing liquidity. So I think there needs to be some sort of incentive for people to, somewhat like DeFi, like adding liquidity on sushi onsen farms. You need to incentivize users to provide some of that liquidity because they are opening themselves up to IL and other types of risk. On the other hand, I think there are a lot of cool protocols out there that are tackling this in other ways. So Genie is a project that's being built right now that's aggregating liquidity across all the types of marketplaces, protocols, including OpenSea. And I think this gives a better way for users who might not see all the opportunities out there. It just aggregates it for the user and gives them the best price across all the exchanges.
One other approach to liquidity is taking a page out of the DeFi DEX world of having protocols that share order books, right? So we're investors in Rarible, both the marketplace but also the protocol, which is attempts to be one of the solutions to true shared order book across. I'd love to see a world where we don't see Web2 marketplaces hoarding inventory, but we have, choose your interface to interact with the globally liquid, NFT world through protocols.
I think that's coming.
Yeah.
Genie's a great project. I think that's kind of the broad mantle to serve as an NFT aggregator. I think we saw Zapper, Zerion, DBank do this for DeFi. It's a little bit unclear whether or not they may serve a role there too. I think they're all edging. We back them all between the Lao and Flamingo. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of move in that direction too, especially now that there's more action in NFTs than, let's say, DeFi.
Aaron, you mentioned the nexus of sort of regulation and DAOs. Do you want to talk about the work you did in Wyoming? And
I think DAOs are super interesting concepts. I think we can get to a point in the structure by eliminating a leader where you can have tradable interest in a DAO that is not considered a security. Security laws are premised on the idea that somebody else, a general partner, if it's a venture capital fund, hedge fund manager, if it's more of a hedge fund, they have asymmetric information. So you, as somebody that provided capital, basically needs information to make sure that they're not running away with your money. I think the real promise of DAOs is that people put their skin in the game, right? They're putting their own capital, they're managing their own money. And so I think that raises a strong argument that the interest in some DAOs, especially DAOs without leaders, should not be considered securities. And I think that that's pretty powerful. And I think we're seeing with DAOs that they have venture or venture-like returns or hedge fund-like returns. Flamingo is kind of an example, pooled about $15 million, looking at just floor pricing, of all the assets that we've kind of collected, it's pretty astronomical in less than a year. So if you can get that return profile, if we can work as an ecosystem to have tradable interest in these DAOs, I think you have a superior vehicle. I think venture funds, hedge funds, they're like horses and buggies, and these are the next frontier for all forms of pooled investment. And I think that they're going to find their route first with NFTs. I just think NFTs are just a cleaner place to start a lot of different things, and that includes lots of the interest and excitement around DAOs.
Let's talk about the Axie category, the sort of play to earn type of NFT. Here we have this really interesting intersection between an NFT that's actually changing over time, like improving in its attributes, or maybe not always improving, but its attributes are changing, it's not static. It has this applicability to a game where some type of yield can be introduced. It opens up the possibility of there being a difference between the owner and the player. And because it has yield, you can see the applicability of financial instruments right away to it. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you see that as an interesting category?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting kind of initial step into the foray, like into all of these things. DeFi meets NFTs, the sort of broader idea that decentralization sort of drastically redefines power structures, and what we've done is essentially created an entire economy in which people can now play a game in a decentralized universe and make a living off of that game. I think there's going to be a lot more experimentation. I think it's still like fairly primitive. It's just by virtue of it being early days, but yeah, it's an exciting first step.
So we backed YGG and Flamingo as part of their first round. So we thought this was a super interesting concept. In the lab, we backed Avagachi, which is another early kind of example of it. Also, right at the beginning, I think we were near the first amount of ether into that project. I think actually P2E is probably going to pick up these DeFi mechanics first. In the kind of network of DAOs that we're building, we just launched another DAO, Ready Player DAO, which is already building out scholarship programs. I think it's up to about 1,000 different scholars. If you look at just the economics of how these things work, Ready Player, as an example, it's on pace to make about $10 million this year. Started a month ago. It's insane returns, insane demand. I think everybody probably here loves video games. I know I did. I played tons of them. I feel we're like at an early Nintendo level. The games are absolutely brutal to play, but people want to play them. So there's a demand to do that. And what we're seeing across the ecosystem is that there'll probably be 10 to 15 new P2E games hitting the market in the next 3 to 6 months. So I think this is going to be a massive category. Thinking about NFTs more broadly, I think there's a feedback loop, an emerging feedback loop between P2E games and the metaverse. So you're seeing in places like Axie where people are playing and their end goal is not to cash out, it's actually to buy a parcel of land in the Axie universe. So if you view the metaverse as a generalized gaming engine, which I do, I think that's going to be the feedback loop there. It's a whole different generation. It's not the DeFi folks, it's not the NFT folks. This is the next generation. Their context is the metaverse and their context is video games, and I think that's what we'll be talking about in 3 to 5 years.
Jay, any thoughts on PD?
Yeah, I remember just like looking at how gaming has evolved in this space. I used to be a CSGO player, and I used to trade skins and all of that, and that was my first exposure to like in-game assets. And then suddenly you have these play-to-earn games where you can not only trade those items, but you're earning actual money by playing the game. And I just think it opens up so many doors. There's so many people in like my generation, Gen Z, where we love playing, but now we're going to get rewarded to play. And I just don't see that going away anytime soon. The revenues for Axie Infinity is absolutely nuts. And there's so many games that are coming out in this space. And I'm just excited and continuing to invest in those projects, basically.
We got about 4 minutes left. What didn't I ask you? Or if you're bold enough, what predictions will you share that we will hold you to? We might even build a protocol around monetizing these predictions. But let's see what you got.
I'll take a bold prediction. I think this is a little bit of a consensus view of Flamingo members. I think the punk floor will hit $1 million. The depth in the punk floor is about 600 punks away from $1 million floor. also kind of goes back to this liquidity point. If you see people consolidating down into blue chips, they're not trading back into ETH, and or other assets. That's actually in Flamingo what made us the most interested in punks. We saw these similar mechanics. The last time I saw it was around Bitcoin and ETH in 2015, 16. So I think that that's the rarest store of value that we're going to have. It's the most liquid, rarest store of value. And it's a super fascinating project, especially as we see it kind of invade into the mainstream. You can own a character and pretty much like a decentralized Disney. It's pretty awesome.
Do you think the sort of number of blue chip NFTs like punks that we'll see will be similar to the number of blue chip names in the regular token world?
I think so. I mean, we also backed art blocks from the beginning, and we're huge holders of the curated art blocks, and they have a similar mechanic. I think people just find certain sets to be visually stimulating. They have a new aesthetic. It's a new vibe, and I think that's critically important. So I think that they're in that category at this point, and they'll probably be 5 to 10 in the near term, and then they'll kind of accrete over time. But it's a brand new ballgame. I mean, this is really, I think, the beginning of Web3, and I think that's why you're seeing all the excitement around NFTs. We've talked about it in the crypto space for the past 5 years, but really the breakout of NFTs, to me, this feels like the beginning of Web 1 all over again. It's broken, doesn't work, there's lots of funkiness with it, but that's the trend line is this is it, right? Like, we are now finally entering Web3, and we're going to build it. It's going to be pretty awesome.
Nick?
I agree with the prediction about the floor price. I'd say to add on to this notion that most capital in NFTs will consolidate to a number of blue chips over time, I'd say we'll start to see some of the leading blue chip NFTs become deeply integrated into a number of the largest DeFi protocols in the space over the next few months to a year. I think we'll start being able to take out significant amounts of leverage against our NFTs, and it'll be this flywheel effect in terms of the kind of growth that the NFT x DeFi space experiences. So,
Yeah. Last one. This is it. Big prediction.
Yeah, I think NFTs will become a $1 trillion asset class within the next year. Bitcoin's at $1 trillion market cap. NFTs have so many applications, as we just described. And once they start getting integrated into these DeFi protocols, we have yield-bearing assets, we have financial assets in the form of NFTs. It's just going to start scaling so quickly, and I don't see there being much time until we hit something like $1 trillion asset class.
I'll say I completely agree that NFTs will eat the rest of crypto, probably in order of 5x, just in terms of total number of participants and, either total value locked or annual transaction volume, just because it appeals to 100x the number of people on the planet, a lot of people on the planet. So I feel like we're just getting started here, and I don't know that there'll only be 2 or 3 bold blue chip names. I just think there's too many. The internet is a grouping of communities, and not every community will affiliate and associate with punks and the other major blue chips. I understand why it would make sense to hold them for a long time, but I think there's another element of NFT ownership that has to do with your passions. So I think we'll see a healthy, broad pyramid base of NFT ownership.
How many do you think, out of curiosity? I think this is a great point, but do you think that's going to look like 1,000 or 100?
I think even more, actually. I would look at Reddit, like, how many subreddits are there? Right. How many micro forums are there? There are hundreds of thousands on the internet. And I think there's NFT applications in all of them. How many sports teams are there? How many sports leagues? So I'd go with more than 10,000.
With enough liquidity and trading.
I don't know how liquid they'll be, and I think this is the question. But I think to your point, I think most people will be hodlers, right? They want to own them, not flip in and out of them all the time, because it's a passion, it's an identity.
Yeah.
Anyway, awesome to talk to you guys. Thank you so much for your wisdom.
Thank
nice
you.
to see everyone here. Thank you to Messari.